Hi, everyone. Welcome to Fiverr's Women's History Month and International Women's Day panel conference, Bridge the Gap. We're excited to be hosting 4 conversations with influential female entrepreneurs from our Fiverr community and beyond.
Thank you everyone so much for joining today. And a reminder that if you want to participate in these panels by asking our speakers questions, making comments, anything like that, please join our Slack workspace for the event via the link in your reminder email. Our first discussion will be worldwide salary transparency and equity, and will be moderated by Bianca Miller-Cole. We'll pass it off to Bianca now and hope you enjoy learning from all of our amazing guest speakers today.
Hello and welcome to today's session on worldwide pay transparency and equity. I'm your host, Bianca Miller-Cole, founder of the UK's go-to personal branding company, The B Group. I work with the FTSE 100 brands to support their teams on building influence and entrepreneurial attitudes. In 2014, I was a finalist on the UK The Apprentice, where I pitched an idea to redefine nude hosiery. And I then ended up being inducted into the Forbes Hall of Fame, the Forbes 30 Under 30 for my brand, Bianca Miller London. I'm also the co-author of Sunday Times best-selling book, The Business Survival Kit, and best-selling book, Self-Made, which resulted in us mentoring over 1,000 entrepreneurs to help them build thriving businesses. But most importantly, I am forever talking about women understanding and being paid their value, which is why I'm delighted that Fiverr chose for me to host today's conversation. And today I am joined by an illustrious panel of entrepreneurs and creators, including Grace Beverly, founder and CEO of sustainably made activewear brand Tala and fitness tech brand Shreddy, with a global reach of over 3 million, a fellow Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree. And in her first year at Tala, the business amassed a following of over 200,000 and sales of 6.2 million. She is also the author of Sunday Times best-selling book, Working Hard, Hardly Working. I'm also joined by Bree Searley, entrepreneur and entrepreneurs coach. Bree launched her first business at the age of 24 and now uses her experience to help others to monetize their business for success and create opportunities for themselves. And we have Celine Flores-Willers, founder and CEO of the People Branding Company. Celine runs the leading personal branding and corporate influence company in Germany and has thrice been awarded the LinkedIn Top Voice on the topics of visibility and personal storytelling in a digital world. And last but not least, we have Natalie Boyer. Natalie is a Fiverr Pro seller and a French actress and famous voiceover pro. Having mastered the world of voiceovers in both French and English, Natalie is also a screenwriter for corporate videos and fiction scripts. Today, we will be exploring the topic of pay transparency and equity in the US and Europe. And we will dig deeper into how women in varying locations are tackling pay disparity and workplace culture. But before we get into the questions, as part of the Bridge the Gap web panel series, Fiverr will be giving away Fiverr credits to 3 lucky winners at the end of today's discussion. For those of you who have registered for today's panel, you should have received an email upon registration, which allows you to sign up for the panel's Slack channel. Within the channel, you'll be able to chat with other viewers and pose questions for our panelists. Those within the Slack channel will have the chance to win the Fiverr credits for their participation. Now, let's get started. So, to the panel, welcome. Thank you very much for being here today. Let me go first to Bree and Natalie. I'm going to ask you the first question. The first question is, what do you think are the most barriers to pay transparency and equity globally, and how can they be addressed? Let me come to you first, Bree.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that we face as women is stereotypes and how those stereotypes actually impact our mindset and fully understanding what's possible. So inevitably, we are taught these limitations, therefore they exist as reality in our minds, and then we continue to reaffirm them as our reality in our experiences. This is actually a psychological phenomenon called the stereotype threat. And it ends up causing women to not only not advocate for themselves in an employer setting, but every single female entrepreneur I work with, the first thing that we start tackling is the fact that they are undercharging for their services. And addressing wise, I firmly believe that we have to stop believing these kind of lies that we have been fed around, like, well, women get paid less, period. That's not true. It's not a reality that we need to continue reaffirming. So I think if we can start changing the narrative around it, we can start shifting the experiences around it as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bree. And to Natalie, the same question to you. What do you think are the most significant barriers to pay transparency and equity globally, and how could they be addressed?
Well, I used to be a lawyer. I mean, I hold the French bar exam, and I used to be a law teacher in labor law. So I'm going to start this way. In France, we have a heavy labor law. Okay, we know that. But about the principle equal pay for equal work, it appeared only in 1996. And, an employer must check equal pay for their employees at the same position, meaning a lot. But here, good luck if you can know how much your colleagues earn. I don't know everywhere else. I mean, that's a question I'm asking you guys. But how much your colleague earns, we never talk about money here. It's like a taboo. We have a different culture. I know it's more open, for example, in the USA. To put it this way, in the USA, you can be asked, well, how much do you earn? Here, it's only, what is your job? Which makes sense. So I don't know, but that's for me the first barrier. How can you know that another person, a man, a woman, can earn more or less than you? And here it's like typical, more than anything else first.
I would definitely agree with that. I think in the UK, we don't really like to talk about money. I think that's changing, but it's changing quite slowly. Let me go to Celine on our second question then. Tell us about your experience as an entrepreneur versus a salaried employee. How has your experience around pay differed in those roles?
Well, first of all, I was employed at EY, Ernst & Young, which is a strategic consultancy, and obviously I was paid differently than now I am an entrepreneur. But generally, I think you need to step back at that point and ask yourself, what do you really want to do? What is your passion? What is the passion you want to follow? And I believe that generally with anything you do with your heart and all your passion, you can earn or make the most of it, and it's gonna come back to you in terms of money as well. But I think that's the first step, to ask yourself what you really want to do, and do you want to be an entrepreneur, or do you want to be an intrapreneur, which is someone actually building a company from the inside within a bigger corporate, for example. And I feel like it's more important to follow the passion than the money. But of course that changed, and in the beginning, in terms of in the corporate job, I had a fixed salary and I could rely on it, and that was great, even though it might have been not the highest salary ever, but I knew it was coming for sure, no matter how my performance was. And in the world of entrepreneurs, it shifts to, you never know what you get at the end of the month. And I think that's generally something you need to be happy to live with this kind of insecurity. And if you are, of course, it can come back in bigger amounts, but that's up to the future and up to how good you are at your job. So I think it's to decide in between security and taking risk, actually.
Do you miss the security?
I don't, but I'm a risk taker and I love it. And generally, I just followed my passion. And, at the beginning, to be honest, I didn't earn much money by freelancing and being an entrepreneur. Actually, I was even below a minimum salary in Germany, even when I started. And still, I loved every minute of it because I just simply loved what I do. And there you go. If you do something you don't like, it's not worth the money either, but opposite as well.
I love that. Thank you very much. Grace, let me come to you. How has your experience been, entrepreneur versus salaried employee? Were you ever employed?
Yes, completely transparently. I don't think I'm always the best person to talk about this difference, just because I was only in an intern role before I kind of started my businesses and decided to explore that. And then having started those businesses at university, that was a kind of natural progression 3 years later when I left university to kind of continue that point. So I wouldn't go as far as to compare a corporate internship, which I'm sure you can imagine how much I was being paid. It was not very glamorous, and kind of going to the point where I am now. But I think that, you know, talking about, and I know that we're going to kind of come on to talk about this a bit more, and I'd like to talk about this a bit more then, but the kind of idea of then valuing yourself in terms of paying yourself as well. And I think definitely, you know, as the companies have grown, it's never been my first intent or never been my first kind of priority to increase my pay accordingly. And I think that's really important to talk about, especially as women. And, you know, I think to me, that's been one of the biggest things I've had to overcome, because when you're actually looking at how someone else is valuing you versus how you value yourself, I think even though I value myself very highly, I think it's very easy to, value other problems that you could solve for the company with that money, which, you know, I think is incredibly important to talk about. And I know there are some really kind of stark statistics on women paying themselves in those types of roles as well.
And it's a great point you've made there, because I think that is the problem, isn't it, in entrepreneurship? The moment where it comes to paying yourself first is always the conversation that people have. But in reality, you're often reinvesting and deploying that money into your business for the business's growth, and often at the start paying other people first, right? So great, I love that. Let me go to Bree. Bree, what are your thoughts on that? Entrepreneur versus salaried employee?
Yeah, as an entrepreneur, you know, when I was a salaried employee, we had a cap, right? Kind of like Celine said, you have what you get paid, and that is simply what you get paid. And what I love about entrepreneurship is that I have the power now to create as much or as little revenue in my business as I want. I'm able to launch new revenue streams. I'm able to open myself up to unlimited wealth. In the last 3 weeks, I've actually done 5 times my average monthly revenue in sales. If I had an employer, unless I was on commission, right, that wouldn't even be a possibility. So I've actually really been in this exploration of how do I build myself as my security, because I actually don't see a job from someone else as secure. There's so many examples. I mean, look at all of the layoffs that are going on right now. Tens of thousands of people all over the world are being laid off like crazy just overnight in the blink of an eye. Is that security? Or am I my security, right? And so that's really been my journey in entrepreneurship, is establishing myself as that level of security so that I know that I'm the one that gets to create the results that I'm looking for in terms of wealth and income.
I love that. I think it turns it on its head. We've always been taught that employment was security, but actually, is it? Is that the security that we're looking for? And do we all need to have an entrepreneurial journey or a side hustle or be entrepreneurial to build that additional revenue? Great point there. Natalie, I'm going to come to you. I want to ask you a slightly different question. I want to ask you how your experiences in your field has informed your view on pay transparency and equity.
Let's put it this way. It's more about probably losing the job against a man than more about the money itself, because men are stronger or bolder than us about getting a job, about asking money. So to me, and employers are tougher on women when it comes about the job itself or the money. So, and as an attorney or even working in an accounting office, I haven't seen a lot of cases about the debate about money, equality in money. So it never influenced my vision, I would say my vision, but it's more about, like Brie was saying, about being fired like that, or getting a position. Getting a position is probably, more difficult than men. I would say that the evolution, to answer your question about the transparency and equity, is more about, firms just go ahead by coercion. They don't want to respect anything, and especially in money. And they will go ahead when they are forced to do it. But even though sometimes they prefer to pay a ticket or go before courts instead of hiring a woman or pay her more or hire a woman over 55, for example. It's a big problem here in France. So because people are less malleable, can I say that? Malleable after a certain age. So yeah, my vision now is more about, that. It's not only the money, it's about all that.
It's not just the money, it's also about the power and the opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thank you. Celine, I'm going to give you a list of different things that may have impacted your experience on pay. And I want you just to tell me maybe just one of them, how it may have influenced your thought processes. So, for example, your network, mentorship, or maybe it's legislation in terms of pay transparency laws, or it might be a previous employer. How has any of those things impacted your personal experience of pay?
Well, I think, yeah, definitely everything has an impact, sort of. But I guess most of it is what Bree said already. It's in yourself. And if you want a higher salary, you need to step up for it. You cannot blame your mentors or your network or anybody else. And I'm also not the kind of person who likes to blame politics or who likes to blame economy or whoever. I'd rather say, hey, do something about it, and start negotiating in a better way. Maybe get a training from someone who can help you negotiate. And I personally feel like I have the biggest stake on it when it comes to making my own situation better. It's about myself and how I negotiate, and I don't want to blame anyone else for it. So it's in yourself.
Okay, I love that. Bree, how do you think your background and identity have influenced your experiences with pay transparency and equity?
Such a great question. And I have a little bit of a different answer than any of the things that you just listed. And I will say I'm going to just briefly touch on this because we don't have a ton of time, but I did go in depth with these stories in my TED Talk, if anyone cares to look it up. But my answer is my lineage. So my great-grandmother, for example, had to put my grandmother and her siblings into foster care in the 1920s in order to divorce her alcoholic husband. My grandmother had to give up her income in order to raise a family because it was more expensive to have a job and put her children in childcare. My mom fought my dad for custody until the day he passed, right? Like, she worked 3 jobs when I was growing up. And so, my lineage is very marked by these women that faced these immense obstacles. And I kind of took a stand and decided for myself, also watching my female peers struggle, that was not a game I was willing to engage in or play whatsoever. So, I had my day job for 8 years as a means to an end. And I consider my day job my first investor in my entrepreneurial journey because it is what allowed me to build and grow a fashion brand over 8 years in a really beautiful way, which I 8 years ago today chose to voluntarily shut down and walk away from and build a new business. But it honestly is the really strong women ahead of me that faced so many limitations that I just took a stand and was like, that is not the world that I am willing to live in. And if I want to live in a different world, it's up to me to do something about it.
Yeah, I love that reflection because, history often dictates how we move forward and we look at the future. And it doesn't just have to be the history of others. It can be your immediate history of your family. So I love that you've taken inspiration from that to kind of change your trajectory. Grace, let me come to you. You touched on this earlier. And there is some statistics around the fact that a lot of startup businesses are now trying to recover from the drop-off caused by the pandemic. And there's a lot of research that shows that female CEOs are paying themselves less than their male counterparts. Do you have any tips or suggestions on how we as women take that step forward to say, actually, we are going to pay ourselves a little bit more as much as we want to invest in our people and our businesses, have you got any tips for us that we can take away?
Yeah, I think the difference. Sorry, can you hear me?
Sorry. Yeah.
I think the difference really is acknowledging that it's not. I think we have this kind of barrier in our head, and by we I mean the people who perhaps are currently thinking this way and perhaps are currently paying themselves less than they maybe should. And the idea is that we should be investing more in the business. But I think as soon as you're able to kind of turn that around a little bit more, and by investing in yourself, you are investing in your business and you are investing in the kind of progress that you want to be making. And if you are not paying yourself enough, and you're more likely to get a lot more burnt out, you're more likely to get to feel really up against it when you're, trying to build this company and likely working very long hours in very high stress situation. I think rather than seeing it as investing in something else in order to grow the business or investing in yourself, both of those options are investing in growing the business, and which is more important in that moment. And there have been lots of times where, for example, we closed our first VC round about 1.5 years ago now, and that was the first time that I got a set salary that wasn't actually from a kind of portion of my earnings from the business, and kind of, really working out a way that could work. It was just, it was a set salary that didn't go up and down, and it was me kind of paying myself as part of that investment deal. And then at that time, when we were looking at hiring a lot of the different kind of global talent that we were trying to get, instantly, as soon as anyone came in a little bit over budget, I was kind of saying, well, you know what, this is my first month of having this, so I'm absolutely fine if we want to reallocate this salary elsewhere. And actually, I think looking at it a little bit more long term and thinking, how happy am I going to be able to be in this if I am not paying myself properly? I'm constantly compromising my earnings in order for, to place other people within the business. And that's going up and down. And I'm not able to give myself the security that I fought for in terms of, getting the investment in this business and running this every day and putting this above everything else. And so I think really flipping it on its head and being able to recognize that paying yourself is not an investment in yourself. It's an investment in the business as well, or not just an investment in yourself, because I do think that we need to flip the narrative on seeing investments in ourselves as important as well. But as soon as you I think for me, it's been really recognizing that it's not me or the business. If I am running the business and if I'm spending every day kind of thinking about that and executing the strategy to make the business happen, then paying me is also kind of investing in that business. So it kind of takes away that decision and that dichotomy, and instead, gives you one answer where you can see what actually strategically is better in that moment. Sometimes it's going to be about reallocating funds. But personally, I have a baseline that I will not be changing anytime soon and will hopefully only go upwards. But really changing that narrative for myself has been incredibly important.
I love what you said there, because it's a conversation about the development of the brand and the growth of the brand and what is necessary for the business, but it's also a conversation about developing your own kind of personal worth and integrity, and saying, actually, this is my baseline, and now I need to structure the business to ensure that I meet my minimum expectation, and everything else is a bonus, right?
Yeah,
I love
think
that.
That's incredibly important. And I think that the more you can it's almost just obeying your own boundaries. And I think we talk a lot about, asking other people to kind of adhere to our boundaries, but actually being able to have that same energy when it comes to yourself, I think is incredibly important. Otherwise, in my opinion, it's really playing the short game, because you're not able to really build yourself something that's sustainable and maintainable. At the end of the day, you might love it less at some point if you're kind of going year after year not being paid fairly and constantly putting other people within the business above yourself. And that's not healthy for you or the business either.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Grace. Celine, let me ask you a question on that. Have you ever decided to allocate yourself a higher salary or given yourself a pay rise in the past? And if so, when and how did you make that decision?
Yes, I definitely did. I think the same way like Grace. And I think as soon as you can really rely on your incomes and you know how your business is developing, and you know your sales pipeline, and you can somehow create a forecast on what is going to come in and what you can take out, I think then you get the security to also pay you more. And of course, from when I started to now, this definitely is an increasing amount. And thank God I'm working so many hours in this business. So of course it must pay off at some time. And still at the same time, what I found really valuable is to get a CFO, a virtual CFO on board. And my business, for example, is bootstrapped, so different to Grace's business, which is funded. I don't have any external capital in my company, which means we are only growing with the current cash flow. So we really have to have a really tight calculation. And I, for myself, I'm a creative person and I do personal branding and I love LinkedIn and all these platforms, but I'm not so good at numbers. And for the first 1.5 and 2 years, it was enough to grow the business to a size of 12 to 14 employees. But then it touched a point to where I didn't feel comfortable anymore managing the finance part myself. But at the same time, I didn't have the money yet to employ someone full-time to work in that department in my company. So for me, the best way at that point was to actually get a virtual CFO on board, and I can call her anytime. I can talk to her anytime. She does really ad hoc analysis for me whenever I need something, and we have a strategic call every month. And I feel like this was one of the best investments I made within the last 6 months, since it really clears up my mind. I really know how much I've got to spend, and that also gives me more clarity about my own salary. So that was a total game changer for me. And I'd always say, invest into someone who can help you with that if you don't have the knowledge yourself.
I can see Grace nodding. She was like, yes, I love this. Grace, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, I just think it is incredibly important. I always talk about the importance of understanding your strengths and understanding your weaknesses. And I really so strongly believe in strengthening your strengths. Sometimes you're going to have to mitigate your weaknesses, especially as an entrepreneur. There are going to be lots of things that you're going to be terrible at doing, and you're going to have to do them anyway, because that's just the nature of the business. But I think, really building the team around you that is not only, being able to identify those first hires, I think, that are really, really going to take your business to the next level. I think we all almost slightly assume that when we're building a business that we have to know how to do cash flow, or we have to know how to do merchandising, or whatever it might be. And actually, if you're building a business because you're a great creative, the likelihood that you're going to be good at those things is not very high. And I think, the kind of ceiling of, if you're building a team around you that's only as good as you are at all of those things, then your business is only going to be as big as yourself. But kind of building that team around you where it's so many, each person is far better than you at what they do. That I've kind of seen firsthand how that takes you from strength to strength. Especially, we bootstrapped up until, 2.5 years into the business. And definitely at that point, it's really it's so important. And, you really feel where every penny goes. I think seeing those things as an investment and seeing the value that they bring, just in the same way as you might be seeing you paying yourself a little bit more as an investment, and being able to see that kind of full capacity and ability of the business go up. I couldn't agree more.
Bianca, may I throw in a question?
Of course you can.
Grace, I've got a question. So why did you change from bootstrapping to actually getting external capital? I guess that's really interesting also to the audience and to me as well. How did that shift come, and why did you decide so?
Yeah, so I'll give a brief answer, and I can always go into it further in the Q&A section if people are interested. But I was really interested in bootstrapping the business. For context, it's a sustainable activewear business called Tala, and so we provide sustainable activewear at a price point that's competitive to non-sustainable activewear, in order for people not to have to pay for the privilege to do better in their consumption. And what we essentially decided was that there was a really clear point that we just recognized that we were very much first movers within the space. There were people who were doing amazing sustainable activewear at a much higher price point, and there were people who were doing amazing activewear at our price point. And we really were first movers in being able to make that happen. And so we felt that taking on external investment, and the right external investment, we took a lot of time kind of working out what that was and who that was. But taking on that in order to be able to put a little bit more fuel in the fire, and also to be able to spend lot less of our time kind of firefighting in a way that, having a cash flow intensive business that surrounds itself a lot around product and, 1 month out or a delay in customs or whatever it might be can really throw your whole finances off. And so we wanted to alleviate that pressure a bit so that we could actually, have a bit more fun experimenting and invest more into inventory, hire global talent, and also kind of start our tech expansion into international kind of territories as well. So it was just the right thing for us to really be able to harness that first mover advantage.
I love that. Thank you very much, Grace. And thank you, Celine, for that very interesting question. I've no doubt the audience will be very happy to have heard that answer. Let's move on then. I've got a few more questions before we get to our fantastic audience who may also have questions. So just as a reminder, if you are joining this webinar session via the Slack channel, please feel free to drop your questions in for our panelists. Additionally, those participating via the Slack channel will have the chance to win Fiverr credits. We will be announcing 3 lucky winners at random at the end of this session, so do get involved. So whilst we're talking about money and disparity, I guess I really want to speak about the ask gap. So there is definitely a gap in terms of the level of salary expectations between men and women, and that often perpetuates unequal pay. According to a source, it's not just CEOs that have this trouble. In many fields, men expect higher salaries than women with comparable qualifications. A study of online job seekers in Argentina found that women asked for 6% less on average, and this gap increases in male-dominated occupations. A survey of US doctors in residency also showed that women's ideal starting salary averaged 92% of men's ideal starting salaries. So some of you have experience as employers. What role do you believe employers should play in mitigating the ask gap? Celine, I'm going to come to you. Do you think, is there anything employers could do to stop that ask gap becoming a problem?
Well, again, I think, first of all, it really is about talking to each other, and that doesn't need to mean talk to others within your company, try to find out sneakily what they earn. I mean, that's obviously a good baseline to know where you stand in the company, but it can also freak you out. Like, it's not nothing that makes you happy, but rather think for yourself, hey, what is what I want to earn? What is what I'm happy with? What do I need for living? And then try to find that conversation around it. And I think that's the most important step you need to take to actually, find a way to talk about it. And that can be just simply by actually sending an email and being like, hey, I want to feed that conversation on my performance within the last 3 months or within the last year even, or maybe some people didn't negotiate for the last 5 years, then please do so and ask for a conversation about it. And then what I feel like is really important, and what I also see in my company, that you actually come with reasonable points to your performance. Just simply saying, I want more money because I'm female employee, that will not, make me as a CEO say, well, yeah, you deserve it simply because you're female. And by the way, I have 90% women in my company. So there are no differences in between anyways. And we're mostly women anyways. But in terms of that conversation, really be prepared and think about what value you're actually adding to the company, and how your performance also shifted and increased over the months and years, and what you're contributing. And I think really prepare carefully for that conversation, because that's what your starting point of the negotiation is. And I as a CEO, I really want to see results, and I want to see why I should increase the salary. And then, of course, it's negotiable. But first of all, come up with your performance and a plan and tell me why.
Thank you very much. Grace, also, I'll come to you, Nassi. I see Nassi raising her hand. So Grace, just quickly, as an employer, is there anything that you feel employers should be doing to mitigate the ask gap?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a difficult balance to strike because you want to make sure you're doing the right thing and you want to make sure you're encouraging, very much that move in the right direction. Obviously, also, it is also your duty to protect, the balance sheet of the company at the same time. And that's kind of, those two things should not be at odds with each other. But when something's not been traditionally done in that way, it's easy to, see them in that way. So I think it's really important to, the obvious ones, making sure that there's always an annual, if not more, performance review, but kind of signposting that as a place that you specifically talk about salary. And that means that it kind of creates this open forum at that point. And I also think kind of tied into that, one of the most valuable things has been just making sure that it is always budgeted for some sort of change in salary kind of from year to year. And I know that that kind of probably sounds incredibly obvious, but I think, if you set yourself up in your kind of budgeting in a way that it's not budgeted, it's not going to be something that you're expecting to happen, then you're always going to have a bit of a nightmare where kind of, someone asks for a salary increase and you think, you absolutely want to offer it to them, but it's going to have to be taken off somewhere else that's going to affect the business in another way. So just always kind of having that in place in order to make sure that, especially in line with inflation, we've got super high inflation in the UK at the moment. And I just think, really protecting yourself in that way. So, it shouldn't be a huge shock when that happens every year. And it also creates a way that, if you have that in for the annual, you have an annual placeholder, you're able to, outside of that, when conversations might come up outside of that, both, able to direct to the time. So, it might be in November and you usually have these conversations in March and you just say, hold on that. If it's not a title change, kind of saying, hold on that. It's not budgeted for a mid-year change, but I'd love to discuss this with you in March, and almost making it less of a, something where people really have to come to you and kind of go out of their way to do that, and instead something where you can, you signpost it's happening, you're prepared, they can be prepared, and it becomes a more constructive conversation rather than this kind of battle. So for me, those have been the things that have really worked. Obviously, it's not always going to be something that can, we're still a small company, and so it's not always going to be something that can be provided, but I think you can both encourage positive change in this direction and also kind of protect your company and your balance sheet at the same time, and kind of by just having open conversations and also having very clear signposting in terms of when those conversations usually happen, and create that kind of open forum, I think is incredibly important.
Thank you very much. Natalie, I want to come to you. I want to ask you a quick question on negotiating and negotiation. What advice would you give to women who want to negotiate their job offer or they want to ask for a raise? And any tips that maybe you've used in the past?
So just to say one more thing, I mean, I do agree with Celine and Grace about that, but I think as an employer, you have to pay attention to the employees who invest in the company. I mean, I still believe in certain loyalty. It's maybe more difficult in big groups, but even though you can make a difference. So as an employer, yes, you can see the ones who are investing in your company. And on the other side, as an employee, especially a woman, you have to believe that you are worth it and you can make it. So men think sometimes they are more allowed to ask for more money, a better job, but you have to believe that you can make it as a woman too. And about a tip, that's it. That's the question, right? About a tip to
a top tip for negotiation. Yes, please.
Well, you have to believe first about your skills. I mean, women are so humble sometimes and so demanding on themselves that sometimes they have doubt. No, you have to believe that you're worth it. But sometimes, let's put it this way. Sometimes you better be quiet because sometimes you get more than you were thinking about. You may have more money than the amount you were thinking about. So the negotiation can be tricky sometimes, but yeah, believe that you can earn as much as anyone else in the company, younger, older, a man, and yes, let the employer make an offer can put it this way, because
I like that. So you're saying sometimes the best piece of negotiation is silence. So just let it give the value, talk about how amazing you are, and then just be quiet. Yeah.
Yeah, you need the skills, of course, but once you get the skills, and I'm sure everyone can get the skills, and it's not about being a woman or a man, but once you have the skills, believe in them, believe that you are worth it, and then you can ask for what you want. And but sometimes it's just be quiet because it can be better.
Interesting. Celine, let me come to you. What would be your top tip for negotiating a job offer or a raise?
Yes, I'd say be the first to make an offer and take control over the deal. So that means throw in a number first before the other person can, because I guess the negotiation always at the end ends up somewhere around there. It's really unlikely to happen that it's then 50% less than what you asked for. So be the first to make an offer. Yeah, that's, I guess, the most important and also most basic, but still most important tip for negotiations.
I love that, Celine. And Bree, can you give me a top tip as well, please?
Yeah, I would say, and I will preface this by saying no one likes to do this. I give this tip a lot to a lot of women, and hardly ever is it comfortable or fun. No one wants to do this, but you need to practice your ask before you make it. Stand in front of the mirror and practice. Because when it first comes out of your mouth, it's probably maybe going to be a little shaky, or you may question, like, this is the amount I want, right? Well, rather than stating it. So you want to be able to go into that negotiation completely confident, saying, this is what I want. This is why I want it. This is why I deserve it. And so you have got to practice that before. You don't want the first time you say it to be in that room. When I raise my prices, I always practice saying the new dollar amounts, because I do not want there to be any insecurity whatsoever when I communicate those to someone else.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We are now going to take some of the questions that have come in from the Slack. And I'm hoping that my fantastic panelists will be given slightly shorter answers, just so that we can get through those questions, if you do not mind. So the first question in is from Shireen. She said, how would you go about showing your value and getting paid your worth as an introverted or shy entrepreneur? Bree, I'm going to come to you first. And if you would like to answer, give me a wave and I'll come to the other two people. So Bree.
So first off, I do not see communicating your wealth and being shy, introverted, or extroverted as either or statements. You can be a shy person and effectively communicate your worth. So I would just invite you, Shireen, to start seeing how these things can be both and statements and not either or experiences.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Celine?
Yeah, maybe also use email. And sometimes, I mean, it's good to talk about it in the first place, but maybe then also confirm it with an email, or generally, if you don't necessarily negotiate your yearly salary, but smaller things like your title, send an email beforehand listing the main bullets, then it's out there already. And it's not the nicest way. You should be able to communicate it sitting at a table. That's way better, definitely. But if you feel like you're going to be too shy, or you're going to hold it back and walk out of the room without saying it, then better send an email before, and you've got it out there already before you walk in. Maybe also a tip.
Excellent. Grace?
I just wanted to add on to that, because I know some people will feel, in terms of the email, you want to make sure that maybe you're kind of both seeing it at the same time. It might be a bit more advantageous in terms of like the negotiation. A very similar thing you can do is print it out exactly what you want. So print, two of those out and have one for yourself and have one for them when you're also negotiating. And it's got the similar effect of having an email. So it's written down, you can't back out, and you can kind of skim over some things, but it's still written there. So you're able to kind of talk them through it at the same time, and you can't back out in that moment. And so if you know that kind of practice very much makes perfect for you, and you probably just need to really push yourself to do it, otherwise you're never going to say it in the room, then kind of printing that out, going through it with them, kind of removes that ability to kind of back out, especially if, they might be a bit of a tricky negotiator. They might, as we've talked about, maybe use silence as a way to, have you backpedal. So it's there, and you can't kind of you can't go back on that, or you can at least discuss around it. But it's what you really want is.
I love that. Andrea S has asked, how did each of you get started? Where did your funds come from? And to preface that question, she is a single mum and would like to get started in business, but wants to understand how you get investors, or do you start with your own funds? If I can go around just really quickly, that'll be amazing. Grace, I'll come to you first. How did you get started?
Yeah, so I believe very, very strongly in a minimum viable product. So I own product businesses rather than service businesses, but service businesses kind of work with this as well. So a minimum viable product is the earliest stage of something that you could be able to sell to people or give to people and be able to kind of collect opinions on. Likelihood is that you're not going to be able to get to, if your end goal is an app, to be able to produce that kind of right at the beginning, unless you're amazing at raising money. But as we know as women, no money goes to us anyway. So I think that kind of, what I did at the beginning was essentially my minimum viable product was a PDF, and that turned into an app 2 years later, but it took a lot of time. And a PDF has no marginal cost. So you're able to, I paid £50 to someone to mock it up in a kind of graphic designed way and make it look vaguely nice. This was about 8 years ago, and they were a student before you think I was underpaying them. And I, that was all based on the information there. That was able to sell and raise money for the further products down the line. So that's where the funds came from at the beginning in terms of the product business. And I think that's incredibly important because you learn so much at that stage too before you fully invested in it.
Excellent. Thank you, Celine.
Yes, to me, it definitely depends on the business model. If you want to build a rocket and fly to the moon, you probably can't do that without an investment. So really think about your business model, and help to find your business model can be the business model canvas. I don't know if some of you might know it. You can fill it out. You can define revenue streams, customer segments, and so on, and have a clear vision of what you want to do in terms of services. And I've built a consultancy for personal branding. I could simply open my laptop and get started, and I could be paid for the first coaching right at the beginning. So I didn't need to have investors. So it really is about the business model that you're building to decide whether to take or raise money and capital or not.
Just a random plug there. My first chapter of my first book is all about that business canvas model. So self-made for anyone that wants to get involved in that. Bree, let me come to you. Can you tell me, how did you get started?
Yeah, so I started both a physical product business and also a service-based business. My physical product business, I started very small. I started with one-off designs and would sell those, and then was able to kind of scale up into my first miniature collection, which was, I think, 4 designs, scale that up into a full collection, et cetera, et cetera. I also happened to get in a car accident and got a settlement and used that settlement to fund my first business. Not recommended, but it worked for me. And then for this business, similar to Celine, the only thing I need to run this business is my laptop and my voice. So service-based businesses are a little bit easier to get started on. The only thing I really invested in at the beginning was I did hire a coach because I didn't know how to run a service-based business. I was product-based before that. And so I did hire a coach, and I actually used my retirement to hire her, and had a lot of judgments around it and fears around it. But my financial planner said to me, you know what, Bree, you saved this money for your future. And while this future looks a little different than the future you thought you were going to use it on, you are using this money for your future. And I can 100% say I wouldn't be sitting here with all of you 8 years later if I hadn't taken that step as well. So I think there's a lot of different ways. Like Grace said, we don't get funding anyways. It's very difficult. So if you can find creative ways to do it, I highly advocate to do that. Start small, work your way up, do what you need to do, and just get started.
I love that. And finally, Natalie, what are your thoughts? How did you get started?
Well, so my business is a bit different because, I come from being an attorney, a law teacher, and so it was different. But I had a passion in life, and my passion was acting, and voiceover became probably a second thing, but it happened actually on Fiverr too. So yeah, you have to. I do agree with you guys. you have to be creative. I mean, if you don't have investors, which is hard to find, true, it can happen. But so be creative, be smart. If you're good at something, believe in it and continue to improve that business. And then, I mean, as a voiceover, I started with my little equipment, and then I now have a studio, and I get a first client, and then another one, and bigger ones, and I improved my skills, I improved my equipment, and this is it. So it can happen, and usually, I mean, today I'm very happy about it because I triple sometimes my wages as a teacher or even in acting in France. So, I'm pretty happy about it. But I started very small. I mean, in my room, and with pillows and now it's like a super studio. So, you have to believe in it, and it happens, but you have to be focused on it.
I love that. So what I got from those answers was focus, invested in yourself or invested in someone that can help you to achieve your goals. And of course, just being ready to put in a little bit of that, startup capital if necessary to get on that treadmill to get started. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to my fantastic panelists today. Thank you to the audience for joining us. This has been a panel all about pay transparency and equity. And I have been joined by the fantastic Grace Beverly, Bree Seeley, Celine Flores-Willers, and Natalie Boyer. And I, of course, have been your host, Bianca Miller-Cole. But the thing you've all been waiting for is to find out who the winners are. So the winners of the Fiverr credits are Jordan Sanders, Deki, Rebecca Nubara, and Julie Chavanu. So congratulations. Fiverr will get in contact with you to give you those credits. So very well done to our lucky winners. And of course, thank you again to our fantastic panelists. For those of you who have been watching this live, thank you for being here. Up next, we have a panel all about being unique, and is a panel focused on the LGBTQ+A individuals who are sharing their unique viewpoints and stories of success. Thank you.